The world usually ignores women like Mary. When you wear a stained apron and smell like grease and cheap coffee, you become invisible. But invisibility can be a superpower, especially when you are the only thing standing between a frightened child and a monster. Mary thought she was just sliding a free plate of eggs to a homeless girl with sad eyes. She didn't know that simple act of kindness was starting a countdown. She didn't know that the quiet girl in the booth held the key to $1 billion empire, or that saving her would bring an army of black SUVs to the front door of a diner that hadn't seen a health inspector in 3 years. Kindness is free, but sometimes the price of doing the right thing is everything you have. The bell above the door at Sal's corner didn't ding. It rattled, a death rattle of brass against cracked glass that signaled another soul seeking shelter from the relentless Seattle drizzle. Mary wiped her hands on her apron, the fabric stiff with dried maple syrup and the grime of a 10-hour shift. It was 6:03 a.m. on a Tuesday. The diner was empty, save for old man Henderson sleeping off a whiskey hangover in the back booth and the low hum of the refrigerator that sounded like a dying plane engine. Then the door rattled. Mary didn't look up immediately. She knew who it was. The girl came every morning at exactly this time. She was small for her age, maybe 7 or 8, drowning in a yellow raincoat that looked 3 sizes too big. She never lowered the hood. "Morning," Mary said softly, keeping her voice level. She had learned early on that sudden movements or loud noises made the girl flinch. The girl didn't speak. She never spoke. She just walked to booth 4, the one with the duct tape holding the red vinyl together, and slid in. She placed a damp, slightly crumpled $5 bill on the Formica table. It was always a 5. Never a single, never a 10. Just a lonely Lincoln that looked like it had been smoothed out by trembling fingers 100 times. Mary poured a glass of orange juice. No ice, just the way the girl liked it, and walked over. She placed the juice down, along with a menu she knew the girl wouldn't read. "Rough weather out there, huh?" Mary asked, sliding the $5 bill into her pocket to ring up later. The girl nodded once, her chin barely clearing the table. Beneath the shadow of the yellow hood, Mary caught a glimpse of a pale jawline and a smudge of dirt on her cheek. But it was the eyes that haunted Mary. They weren't just sad. They were old. They were the eyes of a soldier who had seen the front lines, trapped in the face of a child who should have been worrying about spelling tests. "The usual?" Mary asked. Another nod. Mary walked back to the kitchen, her heart doing that familiar, painful squeeze. The usual wasn't on the menu. The girl could only afford dry toast with that $5 once tax was factored in. But for the last 3 weeks, Mary had been playing a dangerous game with the inventory. "Hey, Sal!" Mary shouted toward the back office, where the owner, Salvatore, was likely calculating how much money he was losing. "I burned a short stack. Again. I'm tossing it." "You're clumsy, Mary. That's coming out of your tips." Sal's voice boomed back, gravelly and irritated. Mary didn't care. She plated 2 fluffy buttermilk pancakes, added 2 strips of crispy bacon, hidden under the pancakes so Sal wouldn't see if he walked out, and drizzled a heavy amount of syrup. She grabbed a side of strawberries she had bought with her own money from the bodega across the street. She brought the plate to booth 4. "Whoops," Mary whispered, sliding the feast in front of the child. "My boss is going to kill me if I throw these out. You think you can help me get rid of the evidence?" For the first time that morning, the girl's posture relaxed. Her small, dirty hand reached out and grabbed the fork. She ate with a ferocity that broke Mary's heart, shoveling the food in as if she didn't know when the next meal would come. Mary went back to wiping the counter, watching from her peripheral vision. Who was she? Where were her parents? The first week, Mary had thought about calling child services. She had even picked up the phone. But she stopped when she saw the bruise on the girl's wrist when she reached for the syrup. It wasn't a playground scrape. It was the distinct, purple imprint of a thumb. A large, adult thumb. Mary knew that mark. She had worn similar ones during her marriage to her ex-husband, a man whose temper was shorter than his memory. She knew that sometimes the system didn't save you. Sometimes calling the authorities just alerted the monster to where you were hiding. So Mary waited. She fed the ghost in the raincoat, and she waited for the girl to trust her. Around 6:30 a.m., the girl finished. She wiped her mouth with a napkin, stood up, and for a fleeting second looked directly at Mary. Her eyes were a piercing, unusual shade of violet blue. "Thank you," the girl whispered. It was barely a breath, scratching against the air. Before Mary could respond, the girl turned and bolted out the door, disappearing into the grey morning fog. Mary walked over to bus the table. As she picked up the empty plate, she noticed the napkin. The girl had drawn something on it in black ballpoint pen. It wasn't a doodle of a flower or a house. It was a drawing of a bird, a hawk, maybe, caged inside a box. But the door of the cage was open, and standing outside the cage was a stick figure with a ponytail and an apron. Mary stared at the drawing, her throat tight. She knows I'm trying to help. Suddenly, the bell rattled again. Harder this time. Mary looked up, expecting a delivery driver or a commuter. Instead, a man walked in. He was wearing a suit that cost more than Mary made in a year, but it was rumpled and his tie was loose. He was soaking wet, no umbrella. He didn't look like he belonged in this neighborhood, let alone in Sal's corner. He walked straight to the counter. His face was unshaven, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He pulled a photo out of his pocket and slammed it onto the counter. "Have you seen her?" the man demanded. His voice was hoarse, desperate. Mary looked at the photo. It was a high-resolution studio portrait of a smiling girl with blonde curls, wearing a velvet dress. She looked nothing like the dirty, matted-haired ghost in the yellow raincoat. "I asked you a question," the man snapped, his hand trembling. "Have you seen my daughter?" Mary looked closer. The hair was different. The clothes were different. But the eyes, those violet blue eyes were unmistakable. It was the girl. Mary's instinct screamed at her. This is the father. This is the man who looks for her. But then she remembered the bruise on the wrist. She remembered the way the girl ate, like a starving animal. And she looked at this man, volatile, aggressive, smelling faintly of alcohol and desperation. Was this a worried father? Or was this the monster she was running from? "I see a lot of kids," Mary lied, her face a mask of bored indifference. "But I haven't seen anyone dressed like that." "Sorry." The man stared at her, his gaze intensifying. He looked around the empty diner, his eyes lingering on booth 4 where the dirty dishes still sat. He took a step toward it. "She likes pancakes," the man muttered, almost to himself. She always liked pancakes. Mary's heart hammered against her ribs. She gripped the coffee pot, her knuckles white. "Sir, if you're not ordering, I have to ask you to leave. Owner's policy." The man turned back to her. The aggression faded, replaced by a hollow, haunting sorrow that confused Mary even more. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a business card, and slid it across the counter next to the photo. "If you see her," he said, his voice cracking, tell her I'm not angry. Tell her I just want her to come home." He turned and walked out into the rain. Mary picked up the card. It was heavy, embossed stock. Anthony Reynolds, CEO, Reynolds Architecture Group. She looked at the photo of the smiling girl again. Then she looked at the napkin with the drawing of the caged bird. "What are you running from, little bird?" Mary whispered to the empty room. For the next 3 days, the routine changed. The girl, Mary had started calling her Lily in her head because of her fragile demeanor. Still came in at 6 a.m., but she was jumpier. She sat with her back to the wall, eyes darting to the window every time a car drove past. Mary kept the food coming. She added scrambled eggs on Wednesday. Thursday, she slipped a chocolate milk carton into the girl's backpack when she wasn't looking. But on Friday, everything shifted. The morning was darker than usual, a heavy thunderstorm battering the city. When the door rattled open, Lily stumbled in. She wasn't just wet. She was soaked to the bone, shivering violently. She didn't have the $5 bill in her hand. She collapsed into booth 4, her head hitting the table. "Hey!" Mary rushed out from behind the counter, abandoning the coffee filters. She reached the booth and touched the girl's shoulder. It was burning hot. "Sweetie, you're burning up." Lily looked up, her eyes glassy. She tried to push Mary away, but she was too weak. "Can't. Stay," she wheezed. "He's close." "Who is close? Your dad?" Mary asked gently, crouching down to be at eye level. Lily's eyes widened in terror. She shook her head frantically. "No, not him. The cleaner." "The cleaner?" Mary frowned. "Who is that?" Lily fumbled with the zipper of her backpack. Her fingers were clumsy with fever. She pulled out a small, battered notebook and shoved it toward Mary. "Read. Page 10. Mary opened the notebook. It was filled with drawings and frantic scribbles. On page 10, in jagged handwriting, were the words, "Stepmother says Dad is sick. Stepmother says I have to go to boarding school. The man in the grey car takes me. He is not a driver. He has a gun on his ankle. He is the cleaner." Mary felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty window. This wasn't a runaway situation. This was a kidnapping. "Okay," Mary said, her voice firming up. "You're not going back out there." "He has a tracker," Lily whispered, tears spilling over. "In my shoe." Mary looked down at the girl's sneakers. They were high-end brand, scuffed and muddy, but distinct. "Take them off," Mary commanded. "But take them off now," Mary said, scanning the street through the window. It was empty. But for how long? Lily kicked off the shoes. Mary grabbed them. "Stay here. Do not move. If anyone comes in, you roll under the table and you stay against the wall. Do you understand?" Lily nodded. Mary ran to the back door of the kitchen, which opened into a narrow alley filled with dumpsters. She took the shoes and threw them as hard as she could into the bed of a passing garbage truck that was just rumbling by the alley entrance. She watched the truck carry the shoes and the signal away toward the city dump on the south side. Mary ran back inside, breathless. "Okay, shoes are gone. Signal is moving away from us." She went to the lost and found box Sal kept under the register. She pulled out a pair of oversized wool socks and a pair of cheap rubber clogs that a dishwasher had left behind months ago. "Put these on," Mary said. She went to the kitchen and quickly heated up a bowl of chicken soup. Sal wasn't there yet. He usually rolled in at 7, so she had time. She brought the soup to Lily. "Eat. Then we figure out a plan." Lily took a few spoonfuls, her color returning slightly. "My name isn't Lily," she whispered. Mary paused. "I didn't think it was." "It's Chloe," the girl said. "Chloe Reynolds." Mary froze. Reynolds. The man from 3 days ago. Anthony Reynolds. "Your dad was here," Mary said carefully. "He was looking for you. He looked devastated, Chloe." Chloe's face crumpled. "She told me he didn't care. She said he paid the cleaner to get rid of me because he wanted a new family with her." Who is she? Elena, my stepmother. Chloe shivered. She signed the papers. I saw them. She's trying to take his company. If I'm gone, and if Dad is declared incompetent, why would he be declared incompetent? Because she's poisoning him, Chloe said, the words heavy and terrible in the quiet diner. I saw her putting the powder in his scotch. That's why I ran. I tried to tell him, but he was so sick. He didn't believe me. He thought I was acting out. Then the cleaner came. Mary's mind raced. A poisoned CEO, a wicked stepmother, a hitman. It sounded like a movie, but the fear in Chloe's eyes was sickeningly real. And the man, Anthony, he hadn't looked just drunk. He had looked sick, pale, sweating, erratic. We need to call the police, Mary said. No! Chloe grabbed Mary's wrist. Elena's brother is a captain in the precinct. That's who they'll call. They'll take me back to her, and then I'll disappear for real. Mary looked at the phone on the wall. She looked at the fragile girl. She realized with a sinking feeling that she was the only line of defense this child had. Suddenly, tires screeched outside. Mary spun around. A grey sedan had pulled up to the curb, aggressive and sharp. It wasn't a police car. It was a sleek, nondescript, government-style vehicle. The door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a long trench coat. He didn't look like Anthony Reynolds. He moved with a predatory grace. He stopped at the window, cupping his hands to peer through the glass. Is that him? Mary asked, her voice low. Chloe peered over the edge of the booth. She gasped, clamping her hand over her mouth. That's him. That's the cleaner. Mary grabbed Chloe's arm. Kitchen, now. She dragged the girl behind the counter and into the kitchen, just as the front door chime rattled. Ding rattle. Hello? A voice called out. It was smooth, calm, and terrifyingly polite. I'm looking for a little girl. She's very sick, and she's off her medication. Mary pushed Chloe into the walk-in pantry and pointed to the space behind the 50-pound sacks of flour. Don't breathe, she mouthed. Mary took a deep breath, grabbed a heavy cast-iron skillet from the drying rack, and held it behind her back. She walked out through the swinging doors to face the man. We're closed for maintenance, Mary said loudly. The man was standing in the middle of the diner. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The door was open, and I smell fresh pancakes. He took a step forward. My name is Victor. I'm a private security consultant for the Reynolds family. We tracked Chloe's shoes to this block, but then the signal moved. Fast. He looked at Mary, analyzing her. She was here, wasn't she? I don't know who you're talking about, Mary said, gripping the skillet handle so tight her fingers ached. Victor chuckled. He reached into his coat pocket. Mary tensed, preparing to swing. But he only pulled out a wallet. He extracted a $100 bill and laid it on the counter. I don't have time for games, sweetheart. The girl is a pathological liar. She's dangerous. I'm here to help her. He took another step. Now where is she? I told you, Mary said, channeling every ounce of anger she had toward the world that ignored her. I haven't seen her. Get out. Victor's smile vanished. He looked at the floor near booth 4. He saw a small puddle of water. Then he looked at the table. He saw the half-eaten bowl of soup. Soup's still hot, Victor murmured. He lunged toward the kitchen. Mary didn't think. She swung the cast-iron skillet with all her might. The sound of cast iron connecting with bone was sickeningly dull, a heavy thud that vibrated up Mary's arm and rattled her teeth. She had aimed for his head, but Victor was fast. Even caught off guard, his instincts were razor-sharp. He had shifted at the last microsecond, taking the blow on his left shoulder instead of his temple. It was enough to make him stagger, but it wasn't enough to stop him. Victor grunted, a sound of annoyance rather than pain, and stumbled back into a prep table. A tray of silverware clattered to the floor, creating a cacophony of metal on tile that echoed through the empty diner. "Bad move," Victor hissed, his face twisting from the polite mask into something feral. He lunged. Mary tried to swing the skillet again, but the heavy pan was slow to recover. Victor moved like a viper. He stepped inside her guard, his hand clamping around her throat before she could draw a breath. He slammed her backward against the industrial refrigerator. The impact knocked the wind out of her, and the skillet clattered uselessly to the floor. "Where is she?" Victor roared, spittle flying onto Mary's face. His grip tightened, cutting off her air. "I'm going to snap your neck, you stupid waitress! Where is the girl?" Mary clawed at his hand, her fingernails digging into his skin. But it was like trying to pry open a steel trap. Black spots danced in her vision. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like a roar in her ears. She couldn't speak. She could only kick her legs, her sneakers squeaking uselessly against the greasy floor mats. "Hey!" a small voice screamed. Victor flinched. A jar of maraschino cherries smashed into the side of his head. Red syrup and glass exploded everywhere. It didn't do much damage, but the shock of it broke his focus. Chloe was standing in the doorway of the pantry, shaking, holding a heavy can of tomato sauce in her other hand. She looked terrified, tiny, and fierce. "Let her go!" Chloe screamed, winding up to throw the can. "You little brat," Victor snarled. He released Mary, letting her slide down the fridge door, gasping for air, and turned toward the child. "You're coming with me. Elena is tired of waiting." "No!" Mary rasped. Adrenaline, sharp and electric, flooded Mary's system. She didn't think about the pain in her throat or the size difference. She saw the man stepping toward the child she had sworn to protect. Mary grabbed the nearest thing on the counter, a pot of coffee that had been sitting on the burner. It wasn't boiling, but it was scalding hot. She scrambled up and splashed the dark liquid directly into Victor's face. He howled. It was a primal, agonizing sound as the hot liquid hit his eyes and skin. He clawed at his face, blinded momentarily. "Run, Chloe! The back door!" Mary screamed, grabbing a rolling pin from the counter as she shoved past the blinding, stumbling hitman. "I can't open it! It's jammed!" Chloe cried from the rear exit. The old metal door was notorious for sticking when it rained. The humidity swelled the frame. Victor was recovering fast, wiping the coffee from his stinging eyes. He pulled a gun from a holster beneath his coat. A silencer was attached to the barrel, long, black, and terrifying. "Playtime is over," he said, his voice dripping with malice, his eyes red and watery. He raised the weapon, aiming it at Mary's chest. Mary looked around frantically. They were trapped in the narrow galley kitchen. The back door was stuck. The front way was blocked by Victor. Her eyes landed on the walk-in freezer. The heavy steel door was right next to Victor, currently ajar because Sal had been unloading stock earlier. "Chloe, get down!" Mary yelled. She grabbed a bag of flour from the open sack on the counter and hurled it into the air between them. A white cloud exploded, filling the space with dust, obscuring vision. Victor fired. "Hot!" The bullet shattered a stack of plates next to Mary's head. He couldn't see. He was firing blindly into the white haze. Mary didn't run away. She ran at him. She lowered her shoulder and tackled him around the waist. It was a desperate, foolish move, but the flour dust had him coughing and disoriented. Her momentum caught him off balance on the slippery floor, slick with cherry syrup and coffee. They both went down, sliding hard. But Mary knew the layout. She scrambled on her hands and knees, kicking him in the shin, and rolled away. "Get inside!" She screamed at nobody in particular, but her intention was the freezer. Victor scrambled up, gun raised, blinking through the flour. He stepped backward to get a better aim. and stepped right across the threshold of the walk-in freezer. Mary didn't hesitate. She lunged for the heavy steel door. Victor realized his mistake a second too late. He fired again as the door swung shut, the bullet pinging harmlessly off the metal exterior. Clang! Mary threw the latch. She spun the safety wheel, locking it tight. From inside, a muffled shouting began, followed by heavy thuds against the door. He was throwing his body against it. The heavy door shuddered, but it held. It was built to keep meat frozen at 10 degrees below zero. It could hold one angry man. Mary slumped against the doorframe, sliding down to the floor. Her throat was bruised purple, her apron was covered in flour and cherry syrup, and her hands were shaking so hard she couldn't make a fist. The kitchen was silent, except for the rhythmic thud, thud, thud from inside the freezer and the sound of the rain outside. Chloe crawled out from under the prep table. She was covered in white dust, looking like a little ghost. She walked over to Mary and wrapped her small arms around Mary's neck, burying her face in Mary's shoulder. "You saved me," Chloe sobbed. Mary hugged her back, tears stinging her eyes. "I got you. I got you." But as she held the girl, Mary's eyes drifted to the kitchen clock. It was 7:15 a.m. Victor was trapped, but he wasn't disconnected. He had a phone, he had backup, and he was working for people with resources. "We have to go," Mary whispered, trying to stand up. "We have to leave now." She grabbed her purse and Chloe's hand. They moved toward the front of the diner. But as they reached the dining area, Mary stopped dead in her tracks. Through the large front windows, she saw them. 4 black SUVs were screeching to a halt outside, blocking the entire storefront. They formed a semicircle, boxing in the diner. Doors flew open. Men in tactical gear spilled out. They weren't wearing the nondescript suits of government agents. These men were huge, wearing Kevlar vests over dark shirts, earpieces, and carrying weapons that looked far more expensive than police issue. Is that the cleaner's friends?" Mary asked, her blood running cold. Chloe peeked over the counter. Her eyes went wide. "No," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of hope and terror. "That's Dad's security detail." The bell above the door didn't just rattle this time, it was nearly torn off its hinges. The front door swung open with aggressive force. 2 massive bodyguards entered first, scanning the room with military precision. They held handguns at the low-ready position, their eyes sweeping every corner of the diner. The booths, the counter, the kitchen door. "Clear left," one shouted. "Clear right," the other confirmed. Mary instinctively shoved Chloe down behind the counter. She grabbed a steak knife from a dirty bus tub, a pathetic weapon against semi-automatic pistols, but it was all she had. She crouched, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Come out!" A deep voice boomed from the center of the room. "We know you're in here." It wasn't the smooth, serpentine voice of Victor. It was rough, authoritative, and laced with panic. Mary rose slowly, keeping Chloe behind her legs. She held the steak knife out with a trembling hand. "Stay back!" she yelled, her voice cracking but loud. "I'll use this, I swear to God!" The 2 bodyguards immediately trained their weapons on her. "Drop the knife. Mum, drop the weapon now. Hold your fire." A 3rd man pushed through the wall of security. It was Anthony Reynolds. But this wasn't the drunken, broken man from 3 days ago. He was dressed in a crisp dark suit, though he looked pale and gaunt, like a man recovering from a long illness. His eyes, however, were sharp and burning with intensity. He was sweating, and he leaned heavily on a cane, but the air of command around him was undeniable. He stopped 10 feet from the counter, staring at Mary. Then his eyes dropped to the small pair of sneakers visible behind Mary's legs. "Chloe?" Anthony whispered. The authority in his voice crumbled instantly, into raw, fatherly desperation. Mary didn't lower the knife. "Stay where you are," she commanded. "She told me about you. She told me about the poison. She told me about the cleaner you hired." Anthony blinked, looking confused and horrified. "The what? Poison? Cleaner?" He took a step forward, his hands raised in surrender. "I didn't hire a cleaner. I've been in a medically induced coma for 3 days. I woke up this morning and found my daughter missing and my security team compromised." "Liar!" Mary shouted. "Victor is in the freezer right now. He said he works for the Reynolds family." Anthony's face went rigid. He looked at his head of security, a hulking man named Stone. "Victor? Victor Krell?" Stone nodded grimly. "He was the new consultant Mrs. Reynolds brought on last month, the one I told you I didn't trust, sir." Anthony looked back at Mary, his expression hardening, not at her, but at the situation. "Miss, please, look at me. I am not the one hunting her. I am the one who tore out my IVs and assaulted a hospital orderly to get here because my private investigator tracked a distress signal to this location." Mary hesitated. She looked at the man's eyes. They were the same violet blue as Chloe's, and they were filled with the same terrified love she had seen in her own father's eyes before he passed. "Daddy?" The small voice came from behind Mary's apron. Chloe peeked out. She looked at the man in the suit. Anthony dropped his cane. He fell to his knees on the dirty diner floor, ignoring the grime on his expensive trousers. He opened his arms. "Coco. Oh God, Coco." Chloe pushed past Mary and ran. She slammed into her father, burying her face in his chest. Anthony wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her hair, sobbing openly. The bodyguards lowered their weapons, turning outward to watch the street, giving them a moment of privacy. Mary lowered the knife. She felt her knees turn to water. She leaned against the counter, letting out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for an hour. "He was poisoning you," Chloe cried into her father's shirt. "Elena. She put powder in your drink. I saw her." Anthony pulled back, holding his daughter's face in his hands. His jaw tightened, a muscle feathering in his cheek. "I know, baby. The doctors found the toxins in my blood. That's why I was in the hospital. The police are on their way to the penthouse. Right now." He looked up at Mary. The gratitude in his eyes was overwhelming. "And Victor?" "Walk-in freezer," Mary said, pointing a shaking finger toward the kitchen. "He has a gun and a silencer." Anthony stood up, helping Chloe to her feet. He turned to Stone. "Secure the freezer. If he's in there, I want him packaged for the police. Don't let him talk to anyone on a phone." "Yes, sir," Stone said. 2 guards moved toward the kitchen with professional efficiency. Anthony looked at Mary. He walked over to the counter. Up close, she could see the sheen of sweat on his forehead and the tremors in his hands. He was barely holding it together physically, running on pure adrenaline. "You," Anthony said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved her. You fed her. You hid her." "She was hungry," Mary said simply, wiping her flour-covered horns on her apron. "And she was scared. I couldn't just let him take her." Anthony reached into his jacket pocket. For a second, Mary flinched, expecting a weapon or money. He pulled out a handkerchief and gently offered it to her. She realized she had blood on her cheek, a scratch from the struggle. "I don't know who you are," Anthony said intensely, "but you just saved my entire world. I am a man of significant means, and I'm a man who pays his debts." "I don't want your money," Mary said, pushing the handkerchief back. "Just keep her safe. She's a good kid. She likes her orange juice with no ice." Anthony smiled, a weak, exhausted smile. "I know." Suddenly, a loud crash came from the kitchen. "Boss!" Stone yelled. The freezer is empty." Mary's eyes widened. "That's impossible. I locked it." She ran to the kitchen, Anthony and the guards close behind. The heavy steel door was open. The lock hadn't been picked. The hinges had been blown off. Small, precise explosive charges. The back of the freezer, where the delivery hatch was open. "He had breach charges," Stone cursed. He blew the rear hatch and went out into the alley. "Perimeter!" Anthony shouted. But it was too late. A piercing screech of tires echoed from the alleyway behind the diner. Mary ran to the back door, pushing past the guards. She looked out into the rain. She saw the grey sedan peeling away, disappearing around the corner. But as the car turned, the window rolled down. Victor's face appeared. One eye was swollen shut from the coffee, his skin red and blistered. He looked directly at Mary. He didn't shoot. He just pointed a finger at her, then drew it across his throat. He was gone. Mary shivered, the cold rain soaking her flour-dusted uniform. "He's not done," she whispered. Anthony stepped up beside her, his hand resting protectively on Chloe's shoulder. His face was grim. "Neither are we," Anthony said. "He knows you now. He knows you helped us. You're a target." Mary looked at him. "So?" "So," Anthony said, turning to face her. "You can't stay here. Elena, my wife, she has connections, dirty cops, private contractors like Victor. If they can't get to me or Chloe, they will come for the person who humiliated them." He looked around the dingy, run-down diner. "Pack your things," Anthony commanded. "You're coming with us." Mary laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Excuse me, I have a shift. I have a cat. I have a life. I can't just jump in a billionaire's SUV." "Your life just changed the moment you hit a cartel hitman with a skillet," Anthony said seriously. "This place isn't safe. My estate is a fortress. We have a guest house. You can bring the cat." Mary looked at Chloe. The girl was holding onto her father's hand, but she was looking at Mary with pleading eyes. "Please, Mary," Chloe whispered. "Victor is really mean. He won't stop." Mary looked at the empty diner. She looked at the grease stains on the wall. She thought about her empty apartment and the eviction notice she had received 2 days ago. And she thought about the look in Victor's eyes, the promise of death. She untied her apron and let it drop to the floor. "I need 20 minutes to get my cat," Mary said. Anthony nodded to Stone. "Escort her. Don't let her out of your sight." As Mary walked toward the door, flanked by 2 mountains of muscle, she realized the opening hook of her life had just ended. The real story was just beginning. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was part of the war. The Reynolds estate was less of a home and more of a compound carved out of the rocky shoreline north of Seattle. High slate-gray walls, topped with sensors and cameras, surrounded 10 acres of manicured lawn, dense pine forest, and a main house that looked like a modern glass and steel cathedral overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Mary sat in the back of the armored SUV, her cat carrier on her lap. Inside, Barnaby, her 20-pound ginger tabby, let out a low, unhappy growl. "I know, buddy," Mary whispered, stroking the carrier through the mesh. "I don't know where we are, either." Chloe was asleep against her father's shoulder, in the seat next to them. Anthony was awake, tapping furiously on a tablet, his face illuminated by the blue light. He looked better than he had at the diner. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a cold, calculating focus. "We're here," Anthony said, his voice raspy. The massive iron gates swung open silently. As they rolled up the driveway, Mary saw men patrolling the grounds with dogs. It was a fortress. "Is this necessary?" Mary asked, looking at a guard with a rifle standing on a balcony. Anthony didn't look up from his tablet. "Elena," my soon-to-be ex-wife, has spent the last 6 months funneling money from my accounts to an offshore shell corporation. She hired Victor Krell, a man known in intelligence circles as the surgeon, for how precise he is. She tried to kill me with arsenic and kidnap my daughter for leverage. So yes, the dogs are necessary. The car stopped. Stone, the head of security, opened the door. "Welcome to purgatory," Anthony joked grimly, stepping out and wincing as his weight hit his cane. Inside, the house was breathtakingly cold. Marble floors, abstract art, and furniture that looked too expensive to sit on. It was a museum, not a home. Mary felt acutely aware of her flour-stained sneakers and the smell of diner grease clinging to her hair. "Gareth!" Anthony barked. A slim man with wire-rimmed glasses and an impeccably tailored suit hurried down the grand staircase. This was Gareth, Anthony's personal legal counsel and right-hand man. "Anthony, thank God," Gareth said, looking flustered. When Stone called, I couldn't believe it. "And Chloe?" "She's safe," Anthony said, gesturing to the sleeping girl being carried in by a bodyguard. "Gareth, I need a full audit of the security protocols. I want to know how Victor found the diner. Only 3 people knew I had a tracker on Chloe's shoe. Me, Stone, and you." Gareth paled but nodded quickly. "Of course. It could have been a hack. Elena has tech specialists. I'll get the IT team on it immediately." He turned his eyes to Mary, his nose wrinkling slightly. "And this is the witness?" "This is Mary," Anthony corrected sharply. "She is a guest. Put her in the East Wing guest suite, the one with the ocean view, and get the kitchen to send up. What do you eat, Mary?" "Cheeseburger," Mary said, her chin lifting defiantly. "And tuna for the cat." For the next 2 days, the house was a hive of activity. Police detectives came and went, taking statements. Mary told her story 5 times. Chloe refused to leave Mary's side, sleeping in the guest room on a trundle bed rather than her own room. But despite the security, Mary couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It started on the 2nd night. Mary couldn't sleep. The silence of the mansion was deafening compared to the sirens and street noise of her apartment in the city. She got up to get a glass of water. As she walked down the hallway, she heard a hushed voice coming from the library. The door was cracked open an inch. "He's suspicious." "Yes." "No, the waitress is still here. She's a variable I didn't calculate." Mary froze. The voice was familiar. "Tonight? That's too risky." "Fine. The storm will cover the noise. Bypass the perimeter at Sector 4. I'll disable the silent alarm." Mary's heart stopped. Sector 4. She had heard Stone mention that was the cliffside entrance, the hardest to guard but the most secluded. She leaned closer, trying to see who was speaking. Through the crack in the door, she saw the reflection in the window. It was Gareth. He wasn't speaking into a phone. He was speaking into a small, encrypted radio headset. Mary stepped back, her foot landing on a creaky floorboard. Creak. Gareth spun around. "Who's there?" Mary bolted. She didn't run back to her room. That's where he would look. She ran toward the only place she knew was safe. She burst into Anthony's office without knocking. Anthony was asleep in a leather armchair, a half-empty glass of scotch on the table. "Wake up!" Mary hissed, shaking him. Anthony jolted awake, reaching for the handgun he now kept on the desk. "What? What is it?" "It's Gareth," Mary whispered frantically. "He's the mole. I heard him. He's letting them in tonight. Sector 4. He said the storm would cover the noise." Anthony rubbed his face, his eyes groggy. "Gareth?" "Mary, Gareth has been with me for 10 years. He's my lawyer. He's the godfather to my—" He stopped. He looked at Mary's terrified eyes. He remembered the diner. He remembered that this woman had instincts, that had saved his daughter when his own expensive security failed. He said, "The waitress is a variable I didn't calculate," Mary said. Anthony's expression shifted from confusion to cold fury. He hit a button under his desk. A red light began to flash silently on the wall. "That's the silent muster alarm for Stone," Anthony said. "If you're wrong, Gareth will just be offended. If you're right—" Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the room in a stark white strobe. Thunder shook the glass walls. The power went out. The red light on the wall died. The room plunged into darkness. "He cut the line," Anthony whispered, grabbing his gun. "You're right. They're already here." The darkness was absolute, heavy and suffocating. The only light came from the occasional flash of lightning tearing through the sky over the Pacific. "Stay close to me," Anthony commanded, his voice low and steady. "We need to get to Chloe." "She's in my room," Mary said. "East wing." "That's the opposite side of the house from the panic room," Anthony cursed. "Move." They moved into the hallway. The emergency lights should have kicked on, but the corridor remained pitch black. Gareth hadn't just cut the power, he had disabled the backup generators. This was a full system kill. They reached the grand staircase landing. Below, in the foyer, Mary saw the beams of tactical flashlights cutting through the gloom. Thwip. Thwip. Two soft sounds, like spitballs hitting a wall. At the bottom of the stairs, one of the loyal guards crumpled to the floor. "Silencers," Anthony whispered, pulling Mary back into the shadows of the mezzanine. "They're clearing the ground floor." "How many?" "Too many," Anthony said. "Stone took 3 guys to patrol the perimeter. They're likely cut off outside. It's just us inside." "And Gareth," Mary added bitterly. "And Gareth." They crept along the upper balcony toward the east wing. They were halfway there when a voice echoed up from the darkness below. "Anthony!" It was Victor's voice, smooth, amused, amplified by the acoustics of the marble foyer. "And the spirited waitress. I know you're up there. Gareth says you haven't made it to the panic room yet." "That's unfortunate." Anthony didn't respond. He gripped Mary's hand and pulled her faster. They reached the guest room. Mary threw the door open. "Chloe!" The bed was empty. Mary felt the blood drain from her face. "She was right here. I left her. Right here." "Looking for this?" Gareth stepped out of the bathroom. He had one arm wrapped tightly around Chloe's chest, pinning her arms. In his other hand, he held a pistol pressed against her temple. Chloe was crying silently, her eyes wide with terror. "Gareth," Anthony said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "Let her go. I'll give you anything. The accounts, the codes. Just let her go." "It's not about the money anymore, Anthony," Gareth sneered, his nice suit looking out of place with the violence of the moment. "Elena offered me something you never did. Respect. She's going to build an empire, and I'm going to be the CEO, not just the lawyer who cleans up your messes." "He's coming up the stairs," Mary whispered to Anthony. She could hear the heavy boots of the hit squad on the landing. They were trapped. Gareth in front with Chloe, Victor and his team behind. Mary looked around the room. It was a standard luxury guest room. Heavy curtains, a vase of flowers, a luggage rack, and Barnaby. The ginger cat was perched on top of the tall wardrobe, his eyes glowing green in the darkness, agitated by the storm and the strangers. Mary looked at Anthony. She squeezed his hand 3 times. 1, 2, 3. It was a signal they hadn't discussed, but Anthony tensed, ready. Mary looked at Gareth. "You're right, Gareth. Anthony never respected you. But you know who else doesn't?" Gareth blinked, distracted by her speaking. "Shut up!" "Barnaby!" Mary yelled. She grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the dresser and hurled it, not at Gareth but at the wardrobe. Smash! The vase shattered against the wood, right next to the cat. Barnaby, already stressed and now terrified, launched himself into the air. He was 20 pounds of muscle and claws, and he landed directly on Gareth's face, screeching and scratching in a frenzy of fur and fear. "Ah!" Gareth screamed, his hand flying up to protect his eyes. The gun moved away from Chloe's head. "Now!" Anthony roared. Anthony lunged. He didn't use his cane. He tackled Gareth with the desperation of a father, slamming him into the wall. The gun skittered across the floor. "Run, Mary! Take her!" Anthony shouted, grappling with the younger man. Mary grabbed Chloe's hand. "Come on!" "Dad!" Chloe screamed. "Go!" Anthony yelled, punching Gareth in the jaw. Mary dragged Chloe into the hallway, just as Victor reached the top of the stairs. He saw them. "Get the girl," Victor commanded his men. Mary didn't run down the hall. She ran into the nearest room, the laundry chute closet. "In here," Mary ordered. It was a small utility closet with a metal chute that led to the basement laundry room. "It's too dark. I'm scared," Chloe cried. "I know," Mary said, her voice trembling. "But you're small. You slide down. You hide in the laundry cart. Do not come out until you hear my voice. Go." She pushed Chloe into the chute. She heard the whoosh of fabric and a soft thump 2 floors down. Mary turned to lock the closet door, but a boot kicked it open. Victor stood there. He looked worse than before. His face was blistered from the coffee burns, and his eye was still swollen. He smiled, and it was the stuff of nightmares. "No freezer this time, sweetheart," Victor whispered. He grabbed Mary by the hair and dragged her out into the hallway. He threw her to the ground. Down the hall, 2 mercenaries had Anthony pinned to the floor. Gareth was wiping blood from his scratched face, holding his retrieved gun. "Where is the girl?" Victor asked, aiming his weapon at Mary's knee. Mary looked at Anthony. He was bleeding from the nose, beaten but alive. She looked at Victor. "She's gone," Mary spat, blood in her mouth. "She's miles away," Victor sighed. "Check the rooms," he ordered his men. Then he looked at Gareth. "Finish the father. I'll take care of the waitress. Slowly." Gareth walked over to Anthony, raising the gun. "Nothing personal, Anthony. Just business." Anthony looked up, his eyes defiant. "You were never good at business, Gareth." Suddenly, the window at the end of the hallway imploded. Crash. Glass rained down as a dark shape swung in on a rappel line. It was Stone. The huge security chief crashed feet first into the 2 mercenaries holding Anthony, knocking them out cold with the sheer momentum. At the same time, the lights flickered and buzzed back on. "System rebooted," a voice crackled over Stone's radio. "Perimeter secure. Police are 2 minutes out." Victor's eyes went wide. The element of surprise was gone. The lights were on. Sirens were wailing in the distance, getting louder. "Abort!" Victor yelled, turning to run. "Oh, no, you don't," Mary growled. She was on the floor, but she saw a heavy marble bust of Caesar that had been knocked over during the struggle. She grabbed it with both hands and rolled it like a bowling ball. It wasn't a perfect shot, but it didn't need to be. The heavy stone head clipped Victor's ankle as he turned. He tripped, crashing face first into the railing of the balcony. He tried to scramble up, but Anthony was there. Anthony, bleeding and limping, picked up his heavy ebony cane. He swung it like a baseball bat. Crack. The cane connected with Victor's jaw. The hitman spun and collapsed, unconscious. Gareth, seeing the tide turn, dropped his gun and raised his hands. "Anthony! Anthony, wait! I was forced! Elena made me—" Stone walked up behind Gareth and simply touched a taser to his neck. Gareth convulsed and dropped to the heap. Silence fell over the hallway, broken only by the heavy breathing of the survivors and the wail of approaching sirens. Mary slumped against the wall. She looked at Anthony. "You okay?" she whispered. Anthony wiped the blood from his lip. He looked at the unconscious men, then at Mary. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "I think I need a new lawyer," he said. 6 months later, the bell above the door at the lighthouse didn't rattle. It chimed pleasantly. The diner had been completely renovated. The cracked vinyl booths were gone, replaced with soft teal leather. The greasy film on the windows was replaced by crystal clear glass overlooking the Seattle harbor. Mary stood behind the counter, but she wasn't wearing a stained apron. She was wearing a tailored blazer and jeans, holding a clipboard. "Table 4 needs a refill on the mimosas," she told the new server, a college kid named Ben. "And tell the chef the hollandaise is a little thin." "You got it, boss." Ben grinned and hustled away. Mary looked around the bustling restaurant. It was hers, or technically, it was a joint venture. Anthony had bought the building, but the deed was in Mary's name. "A severance package from your old life," he had called it. The door chimed. Anthony walked in. He looked healthy, the grey pallor gone, replaced by a slight tan. He walked without a cane now, though he still had a slight limp on rainy days. Next to him was Chloe. She wasn't wearing a hood. Her blonde curls bounced as she walked, and she was wearing a bright pink backpack. "Mary!" Chloe squealed, running past the "Please wait to be seated" sign. Mary met her halfway, scooping the girl up into a hug. "There's my favorite customer. How was school?" "I got an A in art," Chloe beamed. "I drew Barnaby." "Is Barnaby still terrorizing the housekeeping staff?" Mary asked, looking at Anthony. Anthony laughed, leaning against the counter. "He scratched the antique mahogany desk yesterday. Stone is afraid of him. I think we're going to keep him." "And Eleanor?" Mary asked, her voice lowering. "The trial starts next week," Anthony said, his face serious but calm. "With Gareth's testimony and the evidence Stone found on her laptop, she's looking at 20 years to life. Victor is already in maximum security. They can't hurt us anymore." Mary nodded, a sense of peace settling over her. "So," Anthony said, drumming his fingers on the counter, "I was thinking, since I own the silent partner share of this establishment, I believe I'm entitled to a free lunch." "Lunch is for paying customers," Mary teased. "Okay," Anthony smiled, his eyes locking with hers. "How about dinner then? Tonight, just you and me. Stone can watch Chloe." Mary paused. She looked at the man who had once been a terrified stranger in a wetsuit, and then a warrior in a dark hallway. She looked at the girl who was no longer a ghost. "I close at 3, Mary said softly. "I'll pick you up at 4, Anthony said. He leaned in, just for a second, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. As they walked to their booth, Mary looked out the window. It was raining again, the classic Seattle drizzle. But for the first time in her life, the rain didn't look grey and depressing. It looked like it was washing the world clean. She picked up her menu, and walked over to serve her family. The world is full of invisible people, waitresses, janitors, people you pass on the street without a second glance. But Mary's story proves that inside every invisible person is a potential hero waiting for the right moment to step into the light. She didn't need money or power to change the world. She just needed a plate of pancakes and the courage to care when it was easier to look away. If you enjoyed this story of courage, betrayal, and redemption, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that kindness is the most powerful weapon of all. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.